This podcast will start our unit on ecology. So this is a introductory lecture here introducing some of the themes about the field of ecology, and then we'll look at specific areas as we move through the unit. So we begin kind of by defining what ecology is. It's really a study, as this heading is here, the introduction to the Earth's diverse environment. And really, that's what the field of ecology studies, is the environment and all the living things in the environment and the way they interact with each other. So in this, we'll look at some of these environments are aquatic, some are terrestrial. So we refer to those as biomes, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But biomes are these different types of environment on the Earth, and the biosphere is a term that is used for all the living communities and the non-living physical components of that living community as well. So biosphere refers to all of them. Now, in this, the first thing we mentioned that ecology, the study of these interactions, is really has two approaches. One is kind of a descriptive science, and one's an experimental science. So we can study these interactions and describe them, see how they work, and then the other um, is an experimental science. We can make theories and test and evaluate these interactions and these environments by our study or experimentation. So there's different approaches to ecology, I guess we could say. Um, the other thing is that ecology can approach these environments at different levels. And so these levels, we've kind of studied the hierarchy levels in biology. So this is kind of the same thing, but in ecology, the levels of study of interactions, it really generally starts at the organism level. You could study a particular organism, and you could see some of its features that help it fit into that environment or whatever. The next level is a population. So population is a group of the same species that can breed and produce fertile offspring. Then the next level is a community. A community is a group of living things that live in that area. So birds and fish and insects and grass and algae, all those are living things. If they're found in the same area, we call that a biological community. And the ecosystem would include the non-living stuff that community uses as well. So the birds and fish and insects and algae and grass, all that's part of the ecosystem as well. But also in the ecosystem is the water, the air, the soil, all the things that are non-living but still important to those living things as part of the ecosystem. All right, so we're going to kind of delve into these levels. We have a chapter that looks at the population level, a chapter that looks at the community level, and a chapter that looks at the ecosystem level. But that's the different levels of study. So here in your book, it shows an example. Here's one individual flower. We can study that. We can study the features of that flower that help it to survive and reproduce and things like that. This is a population, all the same species that live in an area. This is a community, those flowers, grasses, these animals, any insects. So all the living stuff that's found there is part of the community. The non-living stuff is part of the ecosystem, like the rain and the weather is part of the ecosystem. Water, the soil, all that's part of the ecosystem. All right. So the terms we have here in the outline there for the different spheres of the Earth kind of refer to some of these different levels. The term biosphere, we just mentioned that. Biosphere refers to all the different communities on the Earth. The global ecosystem, you could say, would be the biosphere. Other levels we mentioned here, like the atmosphere, that's part of the non-living important components, um, um, is the made up of all the gases, and the hydrosphere is all the water, and the lithosphere is all the soil and derivatives. So those are the major um, non-living parts of the Earth's atmosphere or Earth's environment. All right. So we mentioned that. Now, in ecology, we have some different um, areas of ecology. So in ecology, we can study these interactions, how these animals kind of in plants and fungi, bacteria, how they interact and work in a food chain and all that kind of thing. Um, but we can also study the impact that we have on these different environments. So example would be like our developmental progress of human cities and highways and things like this, use of chemicals and fertilizers, and all of this has had an impact on the natural ecosystem around us. And so part of ecology, or one area of ecology, is referred to as environmental science. And that's really looking at environmental issues caused by humans' impact. Now, this field of environmentalism is a relatively new field because we've had more and more impact with the Industrial Revolution, that we've had more impact on the environments around us. And there's definitely differences of opinion, even from environmentalists, about how severe this impact is. And what we should do about it is always kind of a political debate. And that kind of thing. But the movement of the environmental movement really began with a few key people. One that your book mentions is Rachel Carson. She wrote a book called Silent Spring, which is talks about how the songbird population diminished because of the use of a pesticide. And so the springs were quieter, Silent Spring. Her book was published in 1962. Popular level book was written, and it really addressed DDT. DDT was the predominant pesticide that was used at this time, and it was very, very effective. But it also, the problem was, it would rain, wash off of the crop, and get into the streams and kill other things that were not pest specific. And so it would cause, and then it would make its way through the food chain and kill other animals up the food chain as well. So DDT was banned after this. The EPA, which at this time was a kind of a smaller government agency. Now it's a huge, lots of power, but they banned DDT after her book, and studying some of the science behind this. They banned DDT. Now, some environmentalists say we should take the ban off because if we use DDT with close scrutiny, that it still could be effective, and that kind of thing. So again, difference of opinions. We even don't use it in third world countries where we used to, where malaria has high incidence rates, and we could, if we did use it, then we could use it and probably reduce the instances of malaria and even save lives. But it may cause some major imbalances in the ecosystems. So anyway, the environmental movement, she was important. There's certainly lots of other figures we could mention that have played a role in looking at the human impact on the environment. All right, so we mentioned some things that kind of apply to our study of the environment, the physical, chemical factors. We talk about thermodynamics, which is a study of energy, and that's a major part of ecology, is studying the roles of energy flow, or the not the role, but just energy flow in these ecosystems. We mentioned the first and second laws of thermodynamics, that energy is conserved. We have the total amount of energy remains the same in the universe. Second law says it can we can transfer it or transform it, but there's always going to be a loss of energy. All right. We also mentioned that these different environments on the globe are different. Kind of based on a number of factors. So we have, of course, we have aquatic, we have terrestrial habitats, and so we characterize our Earth as being patchy. That's a term that ecologists use for kind of describing the Earth as patchiness of the environment. So some environments are just forest. Other environments, you'll have forest interspersed with marshland, and you may have some zones that are sandy or open plain land. So you'll have some patchiness in the environment. That's a good description of our globe. Uh, so another thing that affects the globe is sunlight. So we have the highest, most direct strike of sunlight is at the equator. So we have the highest temperature there. As we move away from the equator, our angle of the sunlight increases. And so that's going to decrease the temperatures. And the amount of radiant energy. So this creates different types of habitats. We have colder temperatures, less radiation, so we have less plant growth, and as we move away from the equator. So, of course, near the equator, we'll have our tropical rainforests and things like that, where we have more growth of plants. So the angle of lightfall will change conditions on the Earth. Another thing is the atmospheric circulation. So we have the movement of the air on the Earth, and this is created by these circular patterns of air called doldrums, and they will rise as air masses will tend to rise as they heat up. So when it gets closer to the equator, it tends to rise. And so when it rises, it displaces air that's right above it, moves it over. And then when it moves over, it creates a circular pattern. And so this circular pattern is common all over our globe. We'll have this series of these circular patterns of air masses that are moving around. And so this is transferring that heat. Now we can get moisture in these air masses as well, and they can pick up moisture when they're moving over the earth, and then they can transfer that. So that also sets up patterns of precipitation and trade winds. Other things that will be affected by this will be things like mountain ranges. Mountain ranges can block some of this air mass, these moist air masses that are moving in an eastwardly direction. When they hit that mountain range, the air mass has to increase in elevation. As it increases in elevation, it can reach its dew point. All the rain can come out, and then we have nothing but a dry air mass when it gets over on the other side of that mountain range. So this creates some very specific types of condition. Lots of rain on this side of the mountain range, none on this side. Most of our deserts, if you look at the western side of the deserts, there's a mountain range, and this is kind of preventing that rain from getting over there because the air masses reach their dew point before they move over. Okay, so there's some other things that we're going to talk about as well. We're also going to get looking at some of the environmental problems like pollution and things like that, but we're going to pick that up in our next podcast. So we'll continue with ecology in our next podcast.